Welcome to Serenity and Fire, the podcast where wellness meets grit. I'm your host, Krista Guagenti, founder of Panacea Luxury Spa Boutique. Join me as we dive into the intriguing world of biohacking, clean living, cutting-edge spa trends, and the hustle, grind, and grit of entrepreneurship. From my personal battles with weight management, infertility, and a 30-year journey to create and launch my dream business, to building a sanctuary for those who have been touched by cancer, I'm here to share real talk, inspire big dreams, and spark a passion for holistic living inside each and every one of you. So let's dive in. Welcome back to Serenity and Fire. Today we're talking about a therapeutic solution that many are describing as a miracle cure. Some are even calling it the future of medicine or the next frontier of longevity. But some are also saying that these solutions are dangerous and overhyped. What we can resoundingly all agree on, though, is that this solution has been and can be incredibly life-changing for many. And depending on who you ask, peptides are either one of the most exciting developments in modern medicine or the latest wellness obsession that's moving faster than the science can back it up. And then there's one peptide in particular that seems to have changed everything. A peptide that has people losing remarkable amounts of weight, quieting food cravings, feeling hopeful, and even feeling skeptical. It's also leaving many of us asking questions we don't understand the answers to. And in some cases, even medicine and science don't fully have the answers for. Questions like, what exactly are peptides? Are they natural? Are they safe? Are they hormones? Are they drugs? Why did they seemingly explode overnight? And are we witnessing the future of medicine, or simply another example of our endless search for a miracle cure? I honestly don't know if I've seen another topic in wellness explode quite like I've seen it happen with peptides. And if you're anything like me, you're probably sitting somewhere in the middle, curious, fascinated, hopeful, and maybe a little cautious too, because peptides do seem to promise a lot. But before we can discuss things like GLP-1s, Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, healing peptides, growth hormone peptides, anti-aging peptides, skincare peptides, and even cognitive peptides, we first need to understand a very simple question. What exactly are peptides? Because while everyone seems to be talking about them, very few people are talking about what they actually are. So let's get into it. The simplest definition of a peptide is this. It's a short chain of amino acids. I know that doesn't sound particularly exciting, but stay with me because these tiny molecules do some incredibly important things inside the body. And in order to understand this entire conversation, this piece is really important. So amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. When a smaller number of amino acids link together, they form a peptide. And when amino acids link together, they form larger proteins. So think of amino acids like this. They are some of the raw materials that our body uses to build, repair, communicate, and function. They're kind of like letters in the alphabet and how letters form words in meaningful sentences, context, and substance. Individually, amino acids are simply building blocks. But when we put them together in a specific sequence, they form peptides, tiny biological messengers that carry instructions throughout the body. And your body makes peptides all day long. Even right now, as you're listening to this podcast, your body is producing peptides that can regulate hunger, blood sugar, metabolism, inflammation, healing, immune function, reproduction, growth, sleep, cognition, and mood. Your body is constantly communicating with itself. And peptides are some of the messengers carrying those instructions. Peptides help tell your body what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and how much of it to do. You can think of it this way. Your body's like an incredibly sophisticated organization. You have different departments, the metabolism department, the recovery department, the immune department, the reproductive department, the brain department. And peptides are some of the emails, texts, and phone calls that are constantly moving between those various departments. Without communication, of course, nothing functions properly, and peptides are part of that communication network. And once you start thinking about peptides that way, something else really becomes obvious. And that is that if communication breaks down, then problems start happening. We see that in business, and the same is true for our bodies. The biological signals start getting weaker. Some signals may get louder in like a bad way, and yet others become completely dysregulated. So messages become much less effective. And that concept turns out to be incredibly important because much of aging and declining function may involve changes in communication throughout the body. And that's the one reason scientists have become so interested in peptides. Now, when people hear the word peptide, they sometimes assume peptides and hormones are the same thing, but that's actually not the case. The easiest way to think about this is as two overlapping circles. One circle is hormones, one circle is peptides. Some things sit only in the hormone circle, some sit only in the peptide circle, and then some sit right in the middle where the two circles overlap. Hormones that are not peptides include estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol, and thyroid hormones. These are hormones because they function as chemical messengers, but they're not peptides. Peptides that are not hormones include collagen peptides, certain cosmetic peptides, and some healing peptides that are currently being studied. These are peptides because they're made from amino acids, but they don't function as hormones. And then there are peptides that are also hormones, like insulin, GLP-1, and growth hormone. These are peptides because they're made from amino acids, but they're also hormones because they function as chemical messengers in the body. So not all peptides are hormones, and not all hormones are peptides, and sometimes the categories overlap. I also kind of think of it this way. Asking whether a peptide is a hormone is like asking whether a tool is a screwdriver. Some screwdrivers are tools, but not all tools are screwdrivers, and not every tool does the same job. Similarly, some peptides are hormones, some hormones are peptides, and some peptides have functions that have nothing to do with hormones at all. The categories overlap, but they're not identical. And I think this matters because the word peptide has almost become synonymous with weight loss medications. But peptides are so much bigger than that. They represent an entire category of molecules involved in communication throughout the body. And in many ways, we're only beginning to appreciate how important and how wide-reaching that communication really is. So why did peptides suddenly explode seemingly overnight? Well, peptides actually aren't new. Scientists have known about peptides for decades. So why does it feel like suddenly they're just everywhere? Well, a few things. One is that our understanding of biology has improved. Obviously, manufacturing has improved, analytical testing has improved, technology has, of course, improved, and researchers have learned much more about how these signaling molecules communicate throughout the body. But I think the biggest reason that we're seeing so much about peptides so suddenly is that scientists began realizing that peptides may allow us to influence biology in remarkably targeted and more precise ways. So if we think about medicine historically, many therapies influence multiple systems simultaneously, sometimes good, sometimes bad. So sometimes that's wonderful, and sometimes that's why side effects occur. Peptides have generated enormous interest because certain peptides appear capable of influencing very specific pathways and very specific signals in the body. And suddenly we're asking questions like, can we influence appetite, recovery, inflammation, healing, cognition, metabolism, and even healthy aging? So the next question that follows is, if peptides are naturally produced in our body, then why do we need to supplement with them? And the answer is, it depends. Sometimes our bodies may not produce enough of a particular signaling molecule, and sometimes production just changes with age. Sometimes receptors become less sensitive. Sometimes disease processes interfere with signaling, and sometimes our physiology changes. And sometimes the demands we're placing on the body far exceed what our natural signaling systems can effectively handle. So think about it. As we age, recovery changes, body composition changes, muscle becomes harder to build, inflammation often increases, insulin sensitivity can decline, healing often slows, appetite regulation changes, sleep changes, hormone changes, and biology changes. Aging is in many ways a story of changing communication in the body. And I love that statement because it's exactly what peptides are. They're communicators, they're messengers. And over time, some of those messages become quieter, less coordinated, and or less effective. Let's use GLP-1 as an example. People with obesity don't necessarily have zero GLP-1 in their bodies. The body does still produce it. But things like appetite regulation, satiety signaling, reward pathways, and metabolic signaling may not be functioning optimally. And the result? The body's I'm full signals may not be sufficiently overcoming the biological drives that encourage eating. Let's use recovery as another example. At 20 years old, you can work out hard, stay up late, recover quickly, and still feel really good. At 50 years old, though, not so much. Recovery takes longer, muscle is harder to maintain, and healing often slows. And part of that story involves those changing signaling pathways throughout the body. So the question often isn't whether your body makes a peptide. The question is, whether the message is getting through effectively. And this is one reason peptide therapy has generated so much interest. The idea isn't necessarily let's replace something that your body has none of. Sometimes the idea is, can we amplify a signal? Can we restore signaling? Can we support pathways that have become less effective with age, injury, disease, or metabolic dysfunction? Now, that doesn't automatically mean that we should intervene, and it certainly doesn't mean that every peptide therapy works. Some applications are supported by excellent evidence, others still remain experimental, and many questions are still actively being studied. So the bottom line is that peptide therapy isn't always replacement therapy. Sometimes it's signal optimization, sometimes it's signal amplification, and sometimes it's simply a hypothesis we're still testing. So where do peptides come from, and are they actually natural? The answer to this surprises a lot of people, but yes, they are actually incredibly natural. Your body makes peptides every single day. The question isn't, are peptides natural? The better question is probably, which peptide, what dose, for what purpose, and how is it being used? Natural doesn't automatically mean safe, and synthetic doesn't automatically mean dangerous. I feel like this is one of those statements that applies to almost everything in wellness and is one that we talk about a lot here on the show and that I just talked about in our hormone replacement therapy episodes, because people often assume natural equals safe and synthetic equals bad, but biology is rarely that simple. For example, cyanide's natural, venom's natural, poison ivy's natural. Obviously, all of those things can still hurt you. Likewise, many synthetic therapies have saved millions of lives. And as I'm always preaching, context matters, always. But this may make you ask this: if our bodies naturally produce peptides, what exactly are we actually putting into our bodies when we take them? Are the supplemental forms of peptides natural, synthetic, plant-based, animal-based, made in a laboratory? The answer is sometimes all of the above. Historically, though, some peptides and hormones were isolated from animal sources. Some involve bacterial or yeast fermentation processes. Some may utilize plant-derived starting materials. Today, however, many therapeutic peptides are manufactured in laboratories. Scientists know the amino acid sequence of a particular peptide and can essentially recreate that sequence. So think of it like a recipe. If you know the ingredients and you know the order they belong in, you can recreate the final product. That doesn't automatically make it safe, healthy, and good for you, or on the flip side, unsafe, unhealthy, or bad for you. It simply means it was manufactured rather than produced by your own body. So the question isn't really whether the peptide comes from a laboratory. The better question is probably whether we've accurately reproduced the peptide and whether we understand what it does inside the body and why it's being used specifically for you. So if you're going to take peptide supplements, how are they administered? Some are injections, oral medications, topical creams, nasal sprays. Some are even sublingual preparations or even powders that require reconstitution before injection. And the delivery method does matter because peptides are proteins, and your digestive system is extremely good at breaking down proteins. That's why many peptides cannot actually be swallowed. They would be digested before ever reaching their intended target, which is one reason that many peptides are injectables. So the goal is to help them reach circulation and exert their effects more optimally. But technology does continue evolving, and scientists are actively developing oral peptide formulations, improved absorption methods, novel delivery systems, longer acting versions, and more convenient administration strategies. And what we now know is that how a peptide is delivered may be just as important as the peptide itself. Now, there's one particular peptide that's definitely captured the world's attention more than any other because the message it appears to be sending has been so profoundly impactful, and that peptide is GLP-1. And over the last several years, it hasn't just changed the weight loss conversation, it may have actually fundamentally changed the entire way that we think about obesity itself. And as I mentioned earlier, when I said that I don't know if I've ever seen another topic in wellness explode quite like peptides, I'm specifically referring to GLP-1s. These medications have become household names, dinner table conversations, social media phenomena, and depending on who you ask, they're either the biggest breakthrough in obesity medicine or one giant uncontrolled experiment. And I think that's exactly why this topic has become so fascinating. So what is a GLP-1? GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1. And remember, GLP-1 isn't something scientists invented. It's something that your body already makes. GLP-1 is a naturally occurring peptide hormone produced primarily in the intestines after we eat. Its job is to help regulate blood sugar, insulin release, glucagon, stomach emptying, satiety, appetite, and in very simple terms, GLP-1 is one of the body's natural signals that says, we've eaten, slow down, we're satisfied. Scientists originally became interested in GLP-1 because of diabetes. The thought process was, if we can harness this pathway, could we improve blood sugar control? That was actually the original goal. Weight loss wasn't, at least not initially. Then something really interesting happened. Patients started losing weight, and I mean a lot of weight. And they weren't saying, I suddenly developed incredible willpower. They were saying, I don't think about food all day anymore, or I don't have the same cravings. I don't obsess over food. I finally feel full. I finally feel in control. And researchers started realizing, hey, wait a minute, something much bigger definitely seems to be happening here, because these medications appeared to start influencing things like hunger signals, satiety signals, reward pathways, food cravings, and food noise. And suddenly the obesity conversation started changing dramatically. And then bam, GLP-1s were the next miracle drug. But they didn't become popular because they're weight loss drugs. Well, maybe that's the case anecdotally, but scientifically, they became popular because they appeared to change the biology that drives obesity. And that's crazy exciting and groundbreaking. And as an analytical science nerd like me, this kind of stuff is something that I totally geek out on. These discoveries have been huge for science and medicine, and honestly, for people's psychological safety too, because obesity has been one of the most frustrating conditions to treat successfully. People lose weight, gain it back, lose it again, gain it again, over and over and over. And then suddenly a medication arrives that appears capable of changing the experience of hunger itself and that whole vicious cycle altogether. And that's why people got excited. And as someone who's been on this weight management roller coaster my whole life, I can definitely understand why. But more excitingly, GLP-1s opened the world's eyes to peptides. Suddenly, people realized, wait, if one peptide can have effects this profound, what else might peptides be capable of? And that's the exact question that scientists are now asking, and researchers are investigating peptides in areas that people care deeply about. Things like weight loss, inflammation, recovery, healing, metabolism, cognition, muscle preservation, sexual health, healthy aging, immune function, skin health, gut health, and in some cases, the early findings have been incredibly promising. Peptides aren't exciting because they're new. They're exciting because we're finally beginning to understand what they've been doing inside the body all along. And this is why so many people believe peptides represent one of the next frontiers in medicine. Because instead of simply treating symptoms, many peptides may allow us to influence the actual signaling pathways that drive physiology. Now, that's an exciting idea, but it also requires a tremendous amount of caution because excitement and evidence are not always the same thing. And this is where I think we need to be super thoughtful. Some peptides have decades of research, some have FDA approval, some are routinely prescribed, others remain experimental, some have robust human data, others have very limited human data. And unfortunately, the peptide industry has exploded so quickly that the marketing has often outrun the science. But not all peptides are created equal. Some peptides are definitely incredibly promising, but some are also controversial. Some are exciting, some deserve caution, some may eventually change medicine. Others may eventually disappear because the evidence simply doesn't support their use. This is still a rapidly evolving field, and that's why I think curiosity and humility are incredibly important in this conversation, because we are still learning. So with that, what all can peptides actually do? Because peptides are not just this new miracle weight loss drug. They're an entire category of molecules. Some can help regulate blood sugar, some can influence appetite, some are being studied for healing and recovery, some influence growth hormone pathways, some play roles in skin health, some may influence inflammation, some are being studied for cognition and brain health, and some may eventually have applications that we haven't even imagined yet. And asking whether peptides work is a little like asking whether medications work. And saying peptides are good or peptides are bad doesn't make much sense. There are literally hundreds of peptides, different mechanisms, different purposes, different benefits, different risks, different levels of evidence, different applications. And over the next several episodes, we're going to unpack all of that. We're going to talk about GLP-1s in depth. We're also going to cover healing peptides, recovery peptides, growth hormone peptides, anti-aging peptides, skincare peptides, and cognitive peptides. and why some scientists believe we're only scratching the surface of what's possible. So here's a summary of today's episode. Peptides are not magic, they're not miracle cures, and they're not shortcuts. They're biological messengers. And the reason scientists, physicians, biohackers, and longevity experts are so fascinated by them is because they may offer entirely new ways of influencing human biology. Peptides may actually represent one of the biggest shifts towards precision medicine that we've seen in decades, not because they're magical miracle cures, but because they may actually allow us to communicate with human biology in more targeted ways. And while GLP-1 medications may feel miraculous for some, for others, they're deeply concerning. For many people, including me, they're both, because I do understand why people are excited about them. I also understand why people are hopeful, but I also have a lot of questions. Questions about muscle loss, digestive issues, cancer concerns, long-term safety, psychological dependency, weight regain, staying on these medications forever, and what happens if we don't yet know the entire story. And I think those questions deserve an entire conversation on their own. So next week, we're going to dive deep into Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, the incredible, the concerning, the science, the hype, and perhaps the biggest question of all. Are GLP-1s helping us solve obesity, or are they simply revealing how little we've understood all along? So as we close out today's episode, please remember that everything shared on Serenity and Fire is meant for general information and inspiration purposes only. The topics we discuss are not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace personalized medical care, so please always consult with your healthcare provider regarding your individual health concerns, laboratory results, medications, and treatment decisions before trying anything we talk about on the show. Your health is unique, and your care should be too. So as we wrap up today, remember that my goal on Serenity and Fire, and of course at Panacea Luxury Spa Boutique, is to always help you create a life where you can function better, age differently, do more, and remain fully engaged in the people and experiences you love most. So if there is ever anything I can do to help you reach that goal, please message into the show and let me know. I really do love hearing from you. And if today's episode has you intrigued about peptides, definitely join me next week for the next part of this conversation. It's going to be powerfully insightful, and you definitely won't want to miss it. And as always, thank you so much for listening to Serenity and Fire. If you're enjoying the show, definitely follow me on social, leave a review, and share these episodes with those you love most. And until next time, protect your peace, lead with integrity, and keep balancing serenity with fire. I'm Krista Guageni, and I'll talk with you more in our next episode. At Panacea Luxury Spa Boutique, we don't just offer traditional spa treatments. We create rituals that relax your mind, restore your health, and rejuvenate your spirit. From biohacking technologies to advanced oncology-trained care, everything we do is designed to help you heal on the deepest level with clean, holistic therapies, products, and amenities that are second to none. And right now, you can experience two of my favorites, our whole body LED light bed or hyperbaric oxygen therapies. And as a thank you for listening, you'll get 10% off your first session when you use the code Serenity10 at booking. What is your panacea? Let us help you find it, because true wellness isn't a quick fix, it's a ritual.